You recording?
At least I hope it's recording.
Let me check mine.
Yeah, it's recording.
Yeah, mine too. Okay.
Go!
Studio buddies doing a podcast with a little gay guitar. Hello
Woo!
and welcome to Studio Buddies podcast. My name is Simon.
And I'm Jamie.
And this week we're going to be discussing materials that we do like and materials that we don't like. But the idea is we might be splitting this into 2 episodes because we've so much materials around us that we'll see how we get on. So we're going to start with materials that we do like.
I thought on a bit of a whim this morning that this would be more of a fun thing to do, because last week it was a really good episode. It was quite heavy though, because of some of the stuff that we talked about. So something more lighthearted, we could talk about different materials. And I'm surprised that we haven't done it yet, to be fair.
Yeah.
And when we were kind of grabbing our materials before we started, I kind of realised that I have so much. So if we're in the same clothes, yes, it was filmed on the same day. I don't think I'm going to change my shirt because that's effort. So there you go.
I'm going to go and have a quick shave. I'm just going to shave all my beard off. It's the same day. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, most weeks it's Jamie who comes up with the idea of what the theme is, and it's always a great idea. And I'm always at a loss of what can we talk about? What could it possibly be? So it's always great ideas. And this week it was really just a corker, because I thought there's so much stuff around us that either we do or don't use, and that we've had to use, and that we've, just found ourselves liking or not really connecting with quite so much. So yeah, a great idea. I also want to take this opportunity to say that I think the key I always struggle with on the intro song is the D, the chord, the D chord. So
the
it
number
always goes
D.
out of tune.
Oh
Number
yeah.
D.
Get that on a t-shirt.
The number D. So yeah,
Brilliant.
I think that's always, every time I do it, it always goes brrr, and I always push my fingers too much. So I'm going to try and work on that. So I apologise to people who've been watching since the beginning. They will know that it's kind of goes all fine until I say with a little gay. I'm pretty sure that's when I say with a little gay it goes out of tune. So I'm going to work on that. It's out of practice.
I think it adds a bit of personality,
Yeah, it's always a good disclaimer. I'm just adding personality to the D chord, number D.
Adding personality to the number D.
So yeah, wait until the 8th episode or something to mention that, but whatever, there we are.
Yeah.
That is what it is. So yeah, cool. Do you want to start us off with...
I can do. The first thing that I am going to mention, and I'm going to put this into... Sorry, my stuff is on the floor. I didn't want to wrestle around too much, so if I kind of just dart on and off, it's because I'm going to the floor. So it's under the same umbrella, and if you've been watching for a while, you know that this is my thing. And it's going to be acrylic paint. I was going to get the big tub of Galleria, but it was in a box, and I am lazy, so I didn't open said box. I kind of just put my hand in and grabbed a paint. So the first one is going to be the tubes of Galleria. I love these. I think that the pigment, for the amount that you pay for them, is really decent. It's kind of more, I'd say, like a middle band paint. It's not dirt cheap, but it's not really expensive. So I think this is kind of like a good in between if you've got a bit of extra cash or you want something for Christmas. And I like acrylic paint because I can paint at home. And as seen by last week's episode, I have 2 cats. So using anything that is slow drying, it's not good for me, because I don't want to have to try and get paint out of a white cat's fur, especially oil. So they're really handy and I like them. Going off that, I'm going to show more of the cheaper range, as you can see by the £2 sticker. So when I first started painting, this was obviously like the go-to because I was poor. And it is pretty decent quality. Like the pigment throughout all of the works paints, I'd say, is pretty consistent. And even if you're kind of using it to bulk up a paint that you've already got, so imagine for a second that these were both blue. If I was a bit stuck for cash and I already had this one, I'd probably mix it with a blue from the works to bump it up a little bit, to save on costing. But I think it's really good. It's one of the better, cheaper brands. And then piggybacking off that, I have a Liquitex Heavy Body. They are very expensive. I've only found one place so far where you can buy them from, and that is Cass Art in Liverpool. They are incredibly expensive. The pigment on it is very good, but they're very thick. I'd say they're closer to oil paint in terms of consistency, but I don't use them as much for acrylic paint because I like the consistency of Galleria, how it's a little bit thinner and you can kind of work around with it a bit more. With these ones, you end up using loads, and for the amount that they are, like as much as I like them, I'm afraid to use them because they are very expensive. And I know that I shouldn't be precious with my materials as an artist, but as a poor artist, I will be. Yeah. So yeah, they are very thick. Like, yeah, it's kind of expensive. So yeah, that's my first one.
Can I ask about the Galleria? Is that the standard Galleria or is it the professional quality one? Because in the tubes I've seen the professional quality. Is that? Oh no, that is the normal one. Yeah, that's the standard one. The same as what I have here, basically, but this is just a tub as opposed to being in the tube. Yeah. The tube makes it look more expensive already, I think.
No, I like the standard ones. I haven't used the professional ones yet, and I think that's probably because they're more expensive. So I don't know what the difference would be between the two. But I stick with these. Yeah.
In my experience, the professional ones are really bright colours. And I like quite dull colours, but you like bright colours because we've discussed this briefly on another podcast. So I think you'll love it. Whereas I always found it a bit, I need to make it, a tertiary colour, which for anyone who doesn't know means that you're mixing it with whites as well as with another colour to mix the pigment down. And that's what I'm trying to do, is soften the strength of the pigment. Because as much as bright colours are nice, if it doesn't suit your palette. So I kind of struggle with the professional one. It kind of makes it just a bit of an adjustment for me that I wasn't ready for, I think.
I think the only thing that I've noticed with these ones, it's not for all of them, but for one of the colours I got, like the colour band around it was like a pale pink. And I was like, oh yeah, that's quite nice. And I tend to go off the colour on the thing because I'm like, that's reliable. I opened it and it was just neon pink. So I think the only thing I can say is like be careful sometimes, because sometimes the colour doesn't match. But a lot of the time you can literally just take them off and like quickly open it and have a look. But yeah, I think for a middle price range they are very decent.
Oh, lovely. Excellent. Well, then I will go to my thing, since you started with your thing. Your thing. My thing mainly is the Unipen brush pen. And for a brush pen, I always say this, I've put this in many videos, it is not a brush. It's a flexible nib. I don't know if you can see it there, Jamie. That's a flexible nib. Yeah. It's not actually bristles at all. And I do have brush pens and I love them, but this is not a brush. Sometimes you get a kind of... I've got other brush pens here because I use them quite often.
The nib on that pen reminds me of, the old handwriting pens that you had in school with the orange ones. Yeah. Yeah, it kind of looks like that.
Yeah, I suppose it does. It's lovely to draw with though, because it's got a great, I say this so often, but it's got a great kind of tapered line where I think I maybe drew this with it. So you can see the variance in the line. How some of it goes thin, some of it goes quite fat. And you can really play around with that and make it really texture based or quite illustrative. That's why I love this pen, but it is compared to here's another brush pen. This is a Faber-Castell brush pen. Again, no bristles, so not your typical brush pen. It's kind of more of a fibre tip, but it's longer, whereas the uni pin is very short nib. Let's show the camera just so you can see. I don't know if it's focusing enough, but that is the nib, tiny little nib, and that's the bristles on that one. So much shorter, but it's still got a great amount of variance in the line, and I think it's just enough for me to not be too wild. But since I have brought these out, I might as well combine the two, just as you did with your pens, your paints. And these are the Faber-Castell grey set of brush pens, and they come in different tones, which are lovely. And so you've got light to dark, and they are fibre, a kind of felt nib to them as opposed to bristles. I should really get out a bristle brush pen, one which is like a paintbrush, because I do have a couple and I love them, but they kind of make brush pens very easy, because you can just spread it along and you can make it really fat and loose and expressive, or you can just crane your hand up a bit more and anchor it with either your elbow or with your wrist, just by pulling your hand back, and get a very neat line which has got a little bit of waver to it, which again is why you have brush pens. If you didn't want that, you'd use a fine liner. But brush pens, particularly, this is a black Faber-Castell brush pen, so very much the same thing as those grayscale ones, but just in black. Now the nib does go a little bit bobbly. See if you can see it on camera. I don't know if you can see there, but the tip isn't a point anymore. It's got a slight bobble to it, and that's something which my Thang doesn't do. My uni pin one doesn't do, because it's not a felt tip like that. It's hard to tell what it is. It's like a little flexible plastic
It's kind of got more like structural integrity to it.
Absolutely it does, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's about half the size of the nib of that one, so it's kind of, it just doesn't seem to have as much damage. But I have bought those in bulk, so I've bought several of those, whereas these ones, I just get them when I can, and I enjoy them, but they don't seem to last quite as long. But I have found, it might be worth mentioning, that these Faber-Castells have blacker ink than what Unipin does. Unipin has a grey ink, not grey, but it's not quite so black, so it kind of browns or greys slightly, whereas this is very black. So if you put them side by side on the same drawing, you can see the difference between the two, and that can matter to people who love black ink or just drawing over painting. So that is something which is very much my comfort media that I will use, is a brush pen or black ink generally, but even the grayscale, because it's a brush pen, I know how they work now and I enjoy it. And the more that you familiarise yourself with architecture and portraiture and still life and just 3D rendering, brush pens are just your friends, really, because you can get a lot done a lot quicker than you can with a single line of a fine liner, you know. So that's it's fairly cheap, you know. As far as the price range that you said, I think that the Unipin is cheaper, but I still think that this is coming up to about £2 per pen. Whereas the Faber-Castell, I think, might be slightly more expensive because they are a bit more of a fancy company, but I do think they do a quality product. So brush pen is my first thing which I really like.
Yeah. My next one, it's not a material, but I feel like I need to mention it, and I wasn't sure about it when I got it out, but it is a jar. It's not a material, but it holds material, so it counts. I love jars. As I said, I think it might be in the last episode, I hoard them. But for someone that paints quite a bit, to save on waste, I will mix paint in a jar. And I have so many jars, it's beyond a joke at this point. Every single time my partner does the washing and there's a jar, I'm like, can you please clean the jar so I can have it? But But I think, because without like a jar, a lot of the time, like I noticed when I was first painting, that so much of my paint would go to waste because I'd end up making too much and I wouldn't use it. Whereas if I put it in the jar, even though I've still got quite a bit left of this one, I know that I can use this colour for other colours if I need to. So if I need a different kind of green, I've already made a green that I can then add to get like a different shade. And like this is quite a bright like lime green, but I know at some point I will use it. So jars for me are a big one. It's normally jars around this size, because anything bigger than that, and I feel like you're wasting quite a bit of paint there. And I've even done it with, you know, those small jam jars that you get in cafes. I used to work in the cafe in Sainsbury's, and we would have so many jam jars, and it got to the point where I started taking some home, because they're only about this big, but the amount of paint that you can get in a jar like that, it's quite a bit. So even though it's not necessarily a material, it's a resource, but it's a good one. So if you do ever have like pasta bakes or pesto, mayonnaise jars, that kind of thing, I definitely recommend mixing in the jar. And also it saves cleaning your paint palette as well. You don't use that as much. And I know how hard it is to get acrylic paint off a paint palette sometimes. So I approved by me.
Have you?
Jamie approved.
It's the stamp of approval.
Yeah. So definitely, even if it's, you know, going into your local cafe and asking them if they have any jars, because most of the time they get put into the bin. Sometimes they don't even recycle them. So if you can go to your local cafe and see if they've got any, they might look at you like you're a bit weird, but most of the time they're more than happy to give them to you, because they don't have any other use for them really. So yeah, that's my second one.
Can I just ask as well, have you mentioned your relationship with colour, as far as you mixing colour in bulk and having that in a jar? That's relevant as well for you specifically, isn't it?
In terms of me being colourblind?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hang on, let's stop here and then I can talk about it.
Okay. Also, isn't it
kind of
especially useful for you to mix colour in bulk in a jar, so that you don't have to remix that colour? Not just because it's impossible to remix a colour, but also because you specifically have your partner help with mixing colours.
Yeah, so I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but when I paint I do have to have my partner's input. So if I mix them in the jar, I've still got the colour in the jar that I've had help with, and I might need help then mixing a new colour from the colour in the jar, but it makes it a bit easier. And especially like as well, if something needs more than one coat, that's really handy. But yeah, I'd say it's a big help for me, because sometimes he's in work and I can't ask him. I don't do it as much in uni because I've had pretty negative reception from me asking what colour things are. People kind of look at you like, that's weird. But yeah, I definitely think it's a big help. I think the hardest thing with it still that has its challenges, like if I was to paint something new and I had this colour, I would have to have clarification as to whether or not this needed adjusting. Because if I couldn't see it and I just went on with this, it could be wrong. And I wouldn't know. So I might need that extra clarification, but it does make it easier for me, definitely. And like I said, saves on waste.
I remember you saying to me in first year that you were concerned that you were going to struggle at some point because you're colourblind, and I was reassuring you that there was that tone is the most important thing and that colours aren't really important. But in hindsight, I think I wasn't considering the fact that if you're painting something and then you've mixed a colour specifically for representation, you're not going to want that to be less accurate than what anyone else could do. So for you personally, you may want to strive for accuracy. And I was thinking of Now, I don't know who the painter is. I should really look it up. They mentioned it on the Draftsman, and I'll put a little insert here where we've got the painter who they mention, and it's someone who was colourblind and painted mixing their own colours anyway, and their painting is now known as quite interesting because they had this, I suppose they just had this difference to other artists who, you know, they didn't really identify, I don't think, that they were colourblind. I could be misremembering this, but I thought that it was realised afterwards that they were colourblind, and that they'd been, you know, creating this body of work. It was all quite vibrant and beautiful, but it was based purely on tone. And I don't think that they were doing sensitive rendering like you do with your painting. It was more block colours and very kind of, it wasn't graphic, but it was that experimental stage of artwork where it wasn't quite so realistic. Basically, their painting is now regarded as interesting because they were colourblind, and that explains, you know, parts of their technique, you know. Well,
I think because I like accuracy. I prefer the colours to be as close as I can get it, but sometimes that is obviously quite a challenge for me. I've had some help in uni currently, with one of my other friends. She will come over, and like one of the abstract pieces I'm doing, she noticed that I had put two very similar colours next to each other, and she was like, did you intend to do that? And I was like, no, because to me they didn't look the same, but they were. So she does kind of chime in. She's like, don't put those two next to each other, they'll merge into one thing. But it can be a bit of a pain. I've tried looking into other ways around it, but I haven't really found anything. Like, I've looked at, you know, the glasses you could get.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, but they're only for, like, reds and greens. Really? And I think I kind of struggle more with
the subtleties,
everything.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's kind of...
Yeah, like, when I was doing one of the Fugglers on my Creepy Children, I had put down the blue first. And I realised, well, I didn't necessarily realise, my partner realised that it was the wrong kind of blue, and that irritates me. Not that he'd noticed, but I like it to be as close as possible because I really like realism. It's just a pain sometimes, but you know, you find ways around it, and you can't, it's harder to ask people with like pictures because obviously taking pictures, the colour isn't going to be the same, so you kind of need someone there.
What's your favourite part of painting?
My favourite part?
Yeah.
Getting the detail.
Is it? So it's the actual execution as opposed to the application or the mixing. Is it more the execution, the finish, and seeing that you've got the detail rendered? Is that what you enjoy?
Well, I really like the application of the paint. That's typically where I kind of lose myself. But I really enjoy the feeling afterwards where I'm like, yeah, that's really close. And getting the tiny, tiny paintbrushes, because I have so many of those where it's like 2 bristles, and just going in with this tiny paintbrush. And, you know, some people might disagree and be like, well, your paintbrush is too small. You're wrong. To get hair-like detail, I absolutely love it. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Because it's probably important for us to go into why we like some of these things as well as what we like. There's different things that interest. Because, I mean, I would have thought it might have been... I mean, I suppose... Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but I was thinking maybe it's the mixing, even though the mixing's got to be the challenging part as far as, you know, mixing the colour.
I think I get more frustrated when I mix the colour because I'll think that I've gotten there and then I realise I haven't, but I can't see why I haven't gotten there because to me it'll look the same, but to someone else they're like, no, you're quite far off. So that can be quite frustrating for me, but as soon as I've got all of the colours mixed and I start painting, that's the part that I enjoy the most. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, then I'm going to change it up a little bit with what I like. My next thing that I like is Oranges. No, it's not oranges. It's
oranges.
Cardboard. Cardboard packaging. Now, I have tried to make it known on my Instagram. My Instagram and my YouTube channel already that I use cardboard more than paper. And this packaging especially I like because of all the shapes cut out of it. And that just means that when I draw on the inside of it after I've deconstructed it, it should be quite an interesting thing to draw and have these gaps. And I'm afraid I won't have an insert for this because it's not done yet. I think I've only done it once, and I'll see if I can find a drawing where I've done that once, but I've never done it like I'm planning on with this, where I'm planning on doing something quite finished, even though it's going to be a doodle on cardboard. I still think it's worth spending time. But cardboard is more than just, gaps. It's things like just pieces of packaging from ice lollies and things. I think it's just nice to have the brown kind of surface to draw on. I think it's just nice having a mid-tone to start with as opposed to white, which can just be a little bit overpowering. Even when it's just slightly grey, I think I prefer to having white because it's just something a bit too bright. I mean, if you look side by side, the difference is maybe only slight, but for me, seeing a clean white surface as opposed to the texture of cardboard. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see the texture, but there's actually bits of dots and details and blemishes in cardboard, which I think is kind of like static, or like, the noise and fuzz, which I think is beautiful. And there's loads of different types. Like if you buy a frame, it'll have a picture in it, and on the back there can be just a beautiful brown or grey sheet that is smooth. It's not glossy, it's matte. It's like, but it's got loads of detail to it already. It's got loads of kind of static in that kind of sheet. It's actually part of the reason why I was having a good conversation with one of the tutors who I no longer get along with, but her and I were having a conversation. She really enjoyed the fact that I had cardboard because of its texture. And that was something which we really bonded over. But that was short-lived. And it's something where I collect a lot of it. I've got loads of it from cereal boxes just because I think the brown inside is exciting to me, to have something which is just a slightly different tone to draw on. And it's all a bit throwaway, it's all ready for the bin or for recycling. And to actually deconstruct that and draw on it, it's just, to me, you're just creating a world where it was otherwise just not even intended for artwork or creativity. It's the flip side of the graphics on the packaging. And it was just something where I thought that could be an art movement that I was thinking about maybe trying to build upon in university and call it something like frugalism, just because it's kind of a frugal way of creating some surfaces to draw and paint on. But again, it didn't go anywhere necessarily. This behind me, you can see that is actually a piece of cardboard that I did a little painting on. And this here is a portrait I did of my studio. Oh no, I'm ripping it now. I'll do an insert.
Oh, don't do that.
Yeah, I don't want to rip it. That's my studio buddy Jamie, who I did a drawing of. Because I love the layers of cardboard. It's got a frame around it already built in, and there was just something quite perfect about that as far as portraiture goes. So yeah, that is definitely something which is material that I love using.
See, I think as someone with Erlands, doing black on okay, so it kind of goes hand in hand with dyslexia. Yeah. So with my Erlands, it's hard to read black on white because it makes my head hurt because the white is so bright. Yeah. So doing a pen drawing on a grey or a brown makes it easier to see. So I really appreciate that, and I think it kind of, I don't know, it kind of gives it a certain warmth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I very much enjoy that because like I said, black and white makes my head hurt.
Yeah, monochromatic, I think it's called, isn't it, when it's just black and white. It's just really abrasive strengths of complete dark to complete light. It's just a bit too, it's a bit too, I don't know, almost...
It's harsh.
Yeah, it is harsh, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that you're reusing cardboard, good for the environment.
Yeah. I mean, it was intended for recycling anyway, but it still just feels like you're salvaging something that is unappreciated. And I used to love doing it, going around to friends' houses, and I wouldn't take anything but pens with me, or just one pen. You know, and I'd just be around there with a pen and say, have you got anything in your recycling that I can look at? And they'd say, what are you talking about? And if they had kids, they'd have a toy box for their, you know, kids.
Yeah.
This is a specific example. And I turned it inside out and started playing with it, and they'd be, you know, playing computer games or whatever. And then when they take a break, I'd show them what I've done, and they were like, I want to keep that now. And say, yeah, you can keep it.
Yeah.
I was going to throw it away, you know. So it's kind of adds value to something that was just intended for the bin. And it's not because it's a great drawing. It's just interesting. It's just something really nice, especially if you have a white pen as well as a black pen, because then you can create light. You've got the mid-tone and you're creating shadow. And it's just a lovely range that you can achieve. And it doesn't have that abrasive look to it that white and black has on paper, because it's only touches of white on brown or grey, so it's only like subtle highlights. So I don't know, I really like that.
Yeah. Okay, so my next one is gonna be a biro.
Oh, love it.
It's a Parker pen biro. So it's quite heavy. It's not the same as my original one that the pin broke on, and I was quite sad. But I love biros. I'll use biros to write stuff as you would with a biro. I also really like biro drawings, especially with this. And I'm not sure if it's like the kind of ink, but sometimes it's not reliable, and I like that about it. So sometimes the ink doesn't come out properly, but it adds that quality to it. And I think I'd prefer biros over fine liners, purely because like some of the experiences I've had with fine liners haven't been too great. But my biro is always there. I don't use it as much as I would like to, because I typically paint instead of draw. But if I was to draw, I'd normally draw with a biro, because I like the lines that it has, you know. It's got like this different quality to it that I think is quite nice. Yeah.
The ballpoint is an interesting feature on a pen. I do think it really adds something where it's like the ink feels more wet, doesn't it? A fine liner feels like dry application of ink, because it's such a nib. And the ballpoint on a biro is just a beautiful design and consideration to make it so much fun to use. It does just spread around beautifully, doesn't it?
I like how scratchy it is as well. I'm not sure if that's because of the ink flow, but to me, whenever I do biro drawings, they do tend to be a bit more scratchy than fine liner stuff. But I also like the fact that the ink isn't like black. It's more grey. And I don't know, I like it. And it's a very nice biro. It's the only It's the only biro I will use. Because like I said, it's got a nice weight to it as well. So it's not light. And if I wasn't filming, I would just... Because I was that annoying person in school. But yeah, a biro. I think, you know, if anyone's doing some rough drawings and stuff, try and do it with a biro, with no pencil, and see what happens, because it'll be different, and it's quite nice, and I think it's an easy way of kind of bringing you out of your comfort zone. Which is quite nice.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
Yeah. What's your next one? Woo for biros.
My next thing that I do like using, since we're still on, well, I say you were still on, I'm certainly still on the ink trip. I'm going to go to this lovely set of Rotring pens, which I've shown recently, but it is, I think it was the last episode where we were talking about things that motivate us to draw. And this was a set that I got because I was heavily influenced by Peter Draws and his doodles. But I bought one first, and I think it was this 131. See, I don't really know the measurements or understand that, as well as I do with fine liners, but it doesn't really matter because you just know that that's thin, that's medium, that's fat, and then you've got other bits and pieces in there. But I love the fact that you've got an ink pot in there to kind of fill it up, and loads of little bits and pieces so that you can unscrew it and you can fill up your ink cartridge in there, which is something which you don't do with fine liners. It's just you use it until it's gone and then you throw it away. And I really struggle to throw away fine liners, even when they're dry and they're no more ink coming out. It just feels like something I don't want to throw. I really struggle to do that. So these feel quite a bit more built to last, and it does really nice lines compared to others. I mean, in a way, it's not quite as nice lines. For example, it's the complete opposite of my brush pen. My brush pen has tapered lines, so that you can go from thin to thick, whereas the rotary pens don't. It's the complete opposite. The rotary pens only do a single thickness of a line. It won't go thinner, it won't go fatter. I mean, you can wisp it on like that and try and get a little bit of a tail at the end, but you can't get that quality from pressing down and lifting the pressure off. It just stays as a single thickness, which may not sound nice, but I really enjoy. And I think that's what I've done this drawing with, is see if I can get it off without ripping it. Yeah, I think that's how I've done this drawing, is with rotary pens. In fact, I know it is.
Yeah.
It's done with rotary pens, and it's single thickness lines, so you can sort of see the lines don't change in thickness. You know, it's like if they do, I've doubled them up. But it's something where the quality of the ink and the line is just something which I really appreciate, that if I'd done that in fine liner, it would look more faded. And I think it's the feel of the pens. I know it sounds weird, but the nib, I think it's a metal nib for the rotary pens. And these are rotary isographs, by the way. The first one I bought was a rotary repeatograph. I still don't know the difference. You know, I've used both. They're interchangeable. I just don't really understand the difference. But they've got a very black ink, which you can kind of tell in the shadows. They're very dark ink, similar to the Faber-Castell, as I was mentioning. And it's just a fun difference. In fact, I've even got a drawing in a sketchbook, which I used someone else's rotary pens before I owned some. And I could tell the difference in that one drawing between the pen I was using of his and my own fine liners in the same drawing, and it just convinced me that I had to get a set of these, because they're just fun to use. They've got a beautiful quality to the thickness of the line. I don't know why I enjoy that. It's more for map drawing, I think, things like that, for illustration. But I think that those things which are designed for one thing and you use them for another can be really enjoyable if you can just adopt that as your favourite tool. So excuse me for a minute, I'm going to try and put this back on the wall where he belongs. I do need to finish this drawing soon. 1 minute. Okay, and I'm back.
My next one is, I don't know how to say this.
I think that is a Kohinoor clasp and grip.
So
excellent.
It's one of these. I got it from uni, and I don't remember why I got it. I think I was just very intrigued by the overall packaging, and I'd seen that you were using one, and I was like, that's very interesting. I don't use it that often, but when I do like it. I think it's good for doing smaller thumbnails for me. And again, it's a weight thing. I like the weight of this. It's very, like, it's quite heavy, and I like well, mine is all broken. I don't know how. But I like the fact that you can interchange what goes in there. So I think right now, I've got chalk in mine.
Me too.
But it makes it easier to hold on to when you're using. Because I've noticed with like willow charcoal, it snaps really easily.
It does.
And these are quite thick and sturdy, and you know there's some like graphite in there. So you get like a real selection of what you want to use. and I like it quite a lot. Yeah, so that's my next one. I think it's, if you can have one in your pencil case, you probably should, because you might end up using it at some point. Yeah. And you won't be disappointed when you do.
Absolutely. I love the mechanism. I'm just going to take out my chalk just to show close up on the camera. This thing which just pops out and then you slide in and you get the chalk back. I always use the chalk in mine these days because I've got Blackwing pencils and I've got other charcoal that I use. So to have one of these just loaded up with a piece of chalk, it's just really nice. It's just a really nice mechanism for having that highlight option.
I feel like you get a lot more control with this as well. Because, you know, it's like a pen. So you don't have to be as delicate, I suppose, when you're holding like a piece of chalk, because it's quite robust. And that's why I like it. I mean, I don't normally do drawings because, as I've said, I paint. But it makes it a little bit easier for me and a little less scary, I suppose. Because I'm always afraid that I'm gonna break something because it's just in my nature. So with one of these, I know that it's not gonna snap, and I quite like that. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, mine have all snapped into little pieces. That's why I've got a tiny little chunk of chalk in there. But at the same time, you can load up a small piece and you won't know the difference between having a full strip of chalk or just a tiny chipping at the end. So I agree. It's a lovely thing. Now, how much time do we have left? Do we have good time? Because I'm going to try and set something up.
I have 12 minutes on the timer.
That is enough. Then, bear with me a moment, because my next thing is going to take a bit of setting up for a second, and it will be worth it, because I'm going to demonstrate something which I think Jamie hasn't seen before. I don't know how many of our viewers will have seen before. So, worth the wait. Play some elevator music for a minute. Studio buddies. No, that's not elevator music. Okay, so first things
first.
As
soon as you say elevator music, my head goes to Wii Sport.
Wii Sport.
Yeah.
Why, what's that? Is that got elevator music? Because I don't game, do I? So I don't really know what that is.
Well, I'm not sure if it's Wii Sport, but it's like the me thing where it's like do 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 do. That kind of thing. Yeah,
that would work. Yeah, excellent. I was thinking you were going to do like human music from Rick and Morty for a minute, because that's kind of elevator music as well. Boop, boop, boop. So much like Jamie's jar for mixing paint, I'm going to use, I collect a lot of these, which is basically from a dip, either salsa or, you know, like a cheese and onion type of dip. And just because it's got a lid, it's great for putting paint in. But on this occasion, I'm going to use it to put a bit of water in. And the reason is, water is your media. But this isn't necessarily what I'm talking about, saying media that I love to use is water, because that's not what I'm trying to say. It is this, which is a butter board. I'm going to put this here, hoping that you can see it. Try to move it a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. And what you do, get a paintbrush, dip it in the water, and then you draw on it, or paint on it, and then you keep going, you know, you keep painting away and try and create something. I'm doing this sideways, so you have to forgive me for how badly this might turn out, but I'm just going to do a bit of a person if I can. But as it dries, a butter board has an interesting quality where the marks you've made start to go very faint and vanish. Now I should have probably put less water on my brush, because it does depend on how much you've loaded up your brush with water. But anyway, the point being is that when you've drawn something on there, all of these marks that I'm making at the moment will disappear. So you can afford to go in making marks, you know, much darker than you normally would, and doing detail much more than you normally would, because when it starts to disappear, you go back on top again with the water, and it darkens certain areas when what you've done mostly is disappearing and vanishing. So this is going to take longer than I thought.
That would be, I think, a really good way for people to practice without fear of, wasting materials.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've showed this to one artist friend of mine, and she just loaded up a brush and just went flap and just splashed water all over it. I was like, what are you doing? That's going to take 5 hours to dry and disappear. But it has this just nice option of, doing a bit of shading.
Yeah.
Where you'd normally wouldn't do it. And again, it's, the more your brush dries, the more you might want to try and experiment and be a little bit more, I don't know, I suppose expressive with where you're putting shadow and how you're trying to render the face. And you might see it already here, partly starting to fade. If you can't, then don't worry, it won't take long. I'm going to try and keep as much water off my brush now as possible so that I can try to show you as quickly as I can how it fades. Because it does just start to disappear. When I first saw this, it was magic and I used it all the time. Whereas these days, I don't often use it, and I really should, because it is a great tool. It's good fun. Like you said, it's great practice.
Yeah.
And it means that you can do a drawing. It's very temporary, so you don't become precious over it. And it's just a unique little toy. It's like kind of a novelty thing, but...
And you can take pictures of it as well, if you...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so that's a shadowy face on one side. I might have to do a time-lapse video for this part just so that people can see what I mean. But
yeah,
let's get some hair. See, I'm getting all self-conscious now because I'm taking so long overdoing it. But let's see if I can see it in the... If you see the reverse image of what you're doing, and I'm looking at, I think, I'm looking at a mirror image of the video that I've got of you. I'm seeing myself in reverse, which is good. I don't know if you know that trick, but any drawings or paintings that you're doing, if you look at a mirror image of it, it will show you any mistakes. Now, can you see this eyebrow here, how it's already disappearing?
Yeah.
That one on that side, that's what it does, is it just slowly goes and disappears. Now, it shouldn't take too long and it'll be almost completely gone. Great fun, great practice. It is something which I don't hardly use anymore, but once it starts to dry and disappear like this, as I said, if you can go back in and do just small touches, what you're doing is you're adding darker marks. Oh, I've got too much water on the brush. Adding darker marks to okay. I'm doing a poor job of showing this, but yeah, you're trying to add darker marks to things that are fading to try and sort of show a level of depth to it.
Yeah.
It's great fun. I do recommend, if you can get a butter board, and get one. Try and add bits of spiky-ish hair. I don't know who this person is, looks like a mugshot. Some ears there, something like that. And one there. So I apologise for how long this has taken for an example, but it is something which I think is a unique and special little, what would you call it? What is it? Surface, or I don't know. It's not media. I don't know. Just art material, I suppose. Butterboard. I think it's quite expensive, so I've never actually purchased it myself. This was just a present from my brother, so I don't know. You'll have to check, see how much it costs. But that is a butterboard. And I think you can see bits and pieces here how it is.
I think the eyebrow on my left is starting to fade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See bits of it just disappear, which is quite fun just to see it go. And but it is taking too long, so I'll have to do a separate version and overlay it on here because I've used too much water. But
I think
you get the idea.
For my next one, we don't have too long before we have to turn the camera off and on again for the viewers, because we have to time things. So my next one, it was previously mentioned in last episode, and I would feel wrong not mentioning it in this episode, and you probably agree. They are Blackwings. Best pencils ever made. Anyone that disagrees, I will egg your house. I won't, but I'll be quite disappointed. Well, no, it's my opinion. Best pencils ever made. They don't roll off anything. The quality is great. The rubbers you can remove and, you know, pop them back in again. They are a bit more pricey, but for what you get, it's definitely worth it, especially if you are big on pencil drawings. The quality it doesn't match up to some of the stuff that you can get in, you know, like the Works, their pencil sets. I think the nibs are a lot sturdier in these as well. And they're soft, so they do just glide on like butter. And I think, you know, if anyone lives anywhere near a Tate in the UK, you can get these from the Tate. They're £3.50 each, or you can go to the website and you can buy a box, which is obviously a bit more expensive. I think you're looking at like 30 quid for a box.
Yeah, I think it can go up to about that, yeah.
Yeah, but the quality that you get is definitely worth it, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone. Even if you are just starting out, I think going to the Tate or something, and just getting one for £3.50, you will see the difference because it's there. And I think they are a lot easier to work with as opposed to some of the other pencils. They're not as scratchy, and I think they're top notch.
You know that I'm going to have to quickly add on to what you've just said, because I am obviously a huge lover of Blackwings because I am a drawer. Ironically, with you saying that they're the best pencils, the one which is known as the best pencil was not among that set that you've got. I don't know if you own one. The 602, which is this one, which says half the pressure, twice the speed. You can't see it on this one because it's been used, but that's what it says along the side of it. And it's known to be the best pencil, but it's not necessarily the artist pencil out of the bunch. The one which Jamie just held up, which is the black one, which I have here as well somewhere. Doesn't matter, it's here somewhere. Anyway, the black one is the one which is the artist pencil. That one there. That is the artist pencil because it's softer. Now, you should use a combination of pencils for any drawing. Anyone who doesn't know this, if you use one pencil for a drawing, you'll have a certain range. If you use two pencils, you'll have a greater range. Three pencils, an even greater range. If the pencils are different hardnesses. So the black pencil is much softer, so you'll get much darker pencil marks with that Blackwing pencil. The 602 it goes to a certain darkness, but not nearly as dark as that black pencil. And then it goes quite light, but not nearly as light as, I think, the pearl, is it, which goes lighter?
Yeah, so the white one.
I'm not sure. The white one there. Now, I should mention as well, in the first year of university, my first presentation was on the Blackwing 602 pencil, because it is known to be the best pencil in the world. And I wrote down a load of random facts about the Blackwing pencil. And
can we quickly pause and start
of course.
filming?
Jamie's changing a battery. Let me just quickly show my camera. That is what my drawing now looks like on the Buddha board. So this is a quick return to the Buddha board. Look at how faded that's gone. Now, it may not look amazing, but I think there's something quite nice about it, almost Rembrandt-like about it, because it's, I'm not saying that my drawing's like Rembrandt, but you know what I mean, as far as like it's high contrast, it's got bits of shadow left, the rest of it has just completely disappeared. So you can see that the eye is now just a dot, and the mouth is just that little smudge there. And it just shows that's where I put the detail in to do a drawing of a face, and that's what happens to it on the Buddha board once it fades away. So this is going to be just a little insert that I'll put into the previous segment. Buddha boards. I think it's just got a lovely quality to a fading image. It's kind of like when someone's graffitied on a wall and it's been blasted, sandblasted off, and yet there's still a remnant of the drawing. Or an old painting, if you've emulsioned over and you can still see a remnant of the painting. It's kind of got that quality to it where it's fading away, that it'll completely disappear soon, but it's nice to see that happen over and over again. So that's what I was trying to get to with the Buddha wood. It's a nice little tool.
Ready?
Are you recording? Yeah, I'm already recording, yeah. So I wanted to do that Buddha board segment. So going back to the 602, I wanted to quickly mention a couple of details because I wrote down certain facts about the Blackwing 602 for a university presentation, and it's certain things which I thought were interesting. It's that a Staedtler pencil is Californian cedar, whereas Blackwing 602 is a Californian incense cedar, which is described as the perfect graphite by the two presenters for Good Mythical Morning, which I think are Rhett and Link, I think their names are. Do you know them? Yeah?
Yeah, I used to watch them.
Now, well, they're people who I look to for their review of the Blackwing 602, and it was very funny. I recommend watching their video. People who are famous for using the Blackwing 602, a chap called Seamus Culhane, who's an animator for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and he requested to be and was buried with a Blackwing 602 pencil in his hand when he died. Stephen Sondheim is a composer for Sweeney Todd, West Side Story and Into the Woods, and he always wrote with the Blackwing 602. Just like Chuck Jones, who's an animator for Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry and Dr. Seuss, he always used to draw with the 602 because it's just so nice. Quincy Jones, who's the producer of Thriller, insisted upon using a Blackwing 602, and Truman Capote, who's a famous writer, most known for Breakfast at Tiffany's. But yeah, there are facts about the Faber-Castell company taking on the Blackwing company after that, you know, changed hands and it becoming the Palomino Blackwing these days that we know is part of the Faber-Castell company. But aside from going into all of that, that's just some random facts about the Blackwing 602 that I thought were interesting. And generally the pencils are just a different animal, I suppose, than most pencils, which have their hard spots, which are really annoying. The worst thing in a pencil is to shade something and then you have this gritty little bit of gravel in there that you have to either shave out or, you know, sharpen, and, you know, it makes a mess on the page, and you just really don't get them very often with Blackwing pencils. They are great for that. So yeah, good choice.
Thank you.
To piggyback off of your love, of your recommendation. It's lovely. So, I suppose this is supposed to be my segment now, so I'm sorry about that, but I couldn't help but piggyback off of your favourite thing.
Yeah.
Here's my black one. Couldn't see it before. Anyway, sorry, distractions. Stuff which I like. Right, I should go to... see, it's tricky now. Okay, I'm going to go to wood. I've painted on. Now this is a piece of MDF, and I love using MDF. I've painted on it for years. I used to cut shapes out of MDF and make different things out of it, and I really appreciate MDF for painting on. As much as I love canvases, I think that wood is something which is really interesting for acrylic painting. And yeah, it's not the same quality as a canvas, but you can get all different sizes and shapes for wood as well. It's much easier to manipulate and recut and resize and purchase, and you just don't have the same rigmarole with canvas. And it is something which I really enjoy using. You can even draw, even with ink, onto MDF, because I've done that once with a fountain pen and managed to get a bit of a made-up portrait on there. So I do think that wood, as far as having a collection, I've got I think 4 of these in my room at the moment, which are this shape. That looks emulsion, but it isn't. This is a plasticky coating on it.
Yeah.
So that's why this side I'm going to emulsion over and paint on. But I do think that wood is a great surface and material for painting, because it's just got a weight to it as well. There's several things about wood which I just think are really they add certain things. Like with canvas, you've got a knit to it, which is really nice, but the fact that wood doesn't have that gives you the possibility of having something super smooth or created your own texture on top. And there are different types of wood. I mean, I've got certain types which have got real wood grain in it. And there's no need for me to show you wood. You know what wood looks like. But just kind of like the actual grain of, of tree, as opposed to that MDF, which is completely flat. So there's different things which are interesting, and I think is similar to the cardboard in the way of cardboard is interesting for its noise and texture, and wood has got a similar thing where a canvas is usually quite clean and well knit together. Wood will have blemishes and will have bits of spots in it, and will just be, instead of it being this super clean knit of a canvas, you've got the kind of, it's hard to show on camera, but there are little spots and little details. So if you didn't want to emulsion over and you wanted to keep this surface to start on, you'd already have points of interest where you'd be adding certain things on top, and it'd just have this nice texture behind it. That I just think things like that, anything which can kind of give you the incentive to do a piece of artwork helps. Because if you're creative like Jamie and I are, there can still be a lot of barriers between you and the creation of a piece of work, just like life collapsing in on you, or your own mental health fighting against you to stop you from doing things, or whatever it ends up being. Having anything which makes it easier or more engaging, I suppose, is things which I really encourage people to try out. And as simple as it sounds, wood is one of those things, you know, especially MDF, which I think is banned in America, you know. I think it's illegal in America, because I think it's because of cutting MDF leaves loads of little tiny particles in the air, and that's toxic to inhale, and people have got sick from it or died from it. Now, I did cut and paint and send to my nephews pieces of MDF, so I got contraband over there, and I love that whole breaking the law. It's just, I don't know what it is about that, but I just love it's like, they didn't catch that, did they? You know, I sent over little gifts for my nephews. They loved it. They don't have to cut it. They don't have to inhale any stuff, but I've sent over some illegal substance to America. And it's just wood. It's just painted wood, so it's pretty innocent as far as illegal contraband substances goes. You know? Yeah. There we go. That's my little multi-side.
Piggybacking off your surfaces to paint on, mine is that tiny piece of canvas board that you showed.
Yeah.
I love these. They're quite small, and I prefer these to actual canvas, and I think that's because of how compact they are. It's a lot sturdier to paint on, whereas like a canvas there's a bit of give, and I don't necessarily like that. They're also really good to cram into frames, whereas obviously canvases, you're not supposed to cram them into cheap frames because that's not made for a canvas. But I love to paint on these and put them in small frames, and I think especially as someone that lives in a one-bedroom flat, if I painted primarily on, you know, canvases, I wouldn't have space. You can literally just stack these and you can put them away somewhere. They don't really get in the way, and they are very cheap. I think you can get like a set of 6 for like £3 or something, so they are a really cheap material. And you know, if you're not a fan of the kind of texture along the surface, I don't know if you can actually see that in the lens.
You can.
Yeah, you can just, you know, paint emulsion on top of it to get it nice and flat. But yeah, I love these. You can get frames to fit these on Amazon. I have bought many. It's that same frame there actually. These fit in those. Brilliant. Yeah. You might have to really like shove it in there, but as long as you don't need to take it out of the frame again, you should be fine. Because I don't think I'll be able to get them out once they're in there. But yeah, these I love those. Yeah.
Excellent. Good stuff. Well, then I'm going to quickly go on to, because we're on to surfaces, I'm going to go on to one, and some of these are going to be on likes, some are on dislikes, and for me, one of my likes is the sketchbook, because I find sketchbooks a really interesting way of creating little worlds and little, you know, memories of places There's one here which is just a flattened town, which I did. This is from 2018. I don't do as much of this as I used to. I do really love sketchbooks for the fact that it's really a way to explore. Like I did a guy with a gun there, and I'm not big on guns or military or anything, but to actually just get a study down so that I can always use that as a reference. And it's like that's my... When I got some dental work done, these are some dental assistants that just posed for me, which I thought was brilliant. They just let me draw them. So you take in a sketchbook and you've kind of got license to do a lot more than what you'd do without a sketchbook. Like people let you onto properties and things like that. But going through sketchbooks, I'm going to try and find an example of... This is quite a nice thick paper on this one. I don't know if you recognise the cover, but if you can find one of these sketchbooks, they do have good thick paper, and you can even do... This is my watercolour painting of a fisheye of around the back. That's the greenhouse I've just taken down recently. So it's kind of... It doesn't bow or, do any kind of wrinkling too much. It's really quite nice. Waiting for my vaccine in the pandemic. I think sketchbooks for me are a real way of feeling free to do a bit of an experiment. Now, I'm not nearly as experimental as other people's sketchbooks who have interesting part drawings. I always try to make something look fairly obvious at what it is, and I'm not trying out a media necessarily. It's or mixed media, I should say. I'm more knowing what I'm using and what I'm trying to achieve. But I need to try and be more experimental, because sketchbooks to me were very much like, I don't want to go onto a canvas because it's too official. I don't want to go onto a clean piece of paper because it's too clean and bright. I want to be... If I'm going to be in a sketchbook, it's going to be kind of, to do things that are a bit more scrappy and a bit more scribbly and just a bit more freedom than you get from something which feels professional. And I think sketchbooks don't necessarily have to be that. So it's a good way to kind of use as a playground for me. So yeah, sketchbooks.
I think my next one, I think I've only got 2 left after this one.
Okay.
Is Prismacolor pencils.
Yay.
I haven't used these too much, partly because I am afraid. I don't want to destroy them, because anyone that has ever wondered as to how much these cost, they are a lot. The ones that I have used, because I did start a drawing, and I'm not used to this as a material in any way, so it is quite daunting for me. They are very soft, and it's so much better than a coloured pencil set for a couple of quid. They are very pigmented. You do have to build layers, which isn't something that I'm used to. So I think it is something that I am going to try and use more when I have more free time, because I'd like to kind of do coloured pencil studies and painting as well, to see if I can try and achieve the same kind of standard, I suppose, in more than one medium. But I do really like them. They are very soft and pigmented. The nibs in them are really sturdy. I think I'm a bit precious over them right now because I don't really know what I'm doing. So I might see if I can try and kind of practice with some cheaper pencils and then kind of graduate to the more expensive sets, but I really like them.
Lovely. I mean, I can imagine that artist that you like who does the detailed insects.
Nicole Parrish.
Painted. I can imagine that could be achievable with a good set of coloured pencils, just because you see a lot of artists who are very realistic rendering gets done with coloured pencils, and I've never managed to achieve that, but I do think that will be something that you'll be able to gravitate towards, when it comes to doing coloured pencil drawings.
I think it's something that I'm definitely going to strive for, because I do love paint, but sometimes it can be quite tedious to pull out all of your paints and have to put them away again, and I want to be able to use more than one technique, I suppose, or like process. So I think coloured pencils would be a good way to go. And I've watched videos on how to use them properly because I don't want to break them. So I know like the general gist of it. It's just that I'm uncomfortable. So yeah, that's something I'll have to work on in the future.
Are we good for time?
5 minutes.
Okay, so piggybacking off of your I haven't used them yet, this is my expensive set of pastels, soft pastels, and I haven't used them yet. But they are, because they are incredibly pricey and they're not massive. They are massive in a way, they're big and chunky. But oh, this is the one that you were mentioning, that why is it so big and chunky, is that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's super chunky. But yeah, they're lovely. They kind of look like sweets to me. Makes me want to eat them because they're just delicious colours. And I love using soft pastels, but because these are so much more, so much less affordable, I can't purchase these again. Plus the shop I bought these from was closing due to the pandemic, so I wanted to support the shop. So I bought a load of paint brushes, I bought these, I bought paints, all very expensive, but I thought, I've got a student loan, I want to support an art shop that's been there for decades and it's now closing. So I bought as much as I could, and this was one of those purchases where I just thought, I can't wait to use them, but I'm not great with pastels yet. And the best that I've done with pastels were expensive ones, and these are that set which are an investment for the future. Unison colour soft pastels. It's a lovely little box that they came in, and they're just kind of like one of those treasured objects at the moment. But if you haven't tried soft pastels, I recommend maybe getting some cheaper ones first, just so that you can play around. They're very messy, you'll have it all over your hands, all over the surface, there's dust everywhere, so it's not a clean material to use or media to use. But they are enjoyable, and things you can achieve with these are unlike other type of medium. So I'm using medium and media wrong. Media is the plural and medium is the singular. So yeah, that's what I like, is this type of soft pastel.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so my next one is gonna be oil paint.
Ooh.
This set was bought for Christmas by my dear friend Simon. I this year had decided to start doing oil paint because I was painting on such a large scale, and I have never used oil paint before until this year. And you were really excited for me to use oil paint because they're just so different and I really enjoy them. They are very pigmented compared to acrylic. The only problem though that I'm facing with it is the fact that they take so long to cure. So it's something that I'm not going to be able to do when I finish uni because I'm not going to be able to put it anywhere, which is such a shame because I do very much enjoy them. They're so different, and trying to figure out like the right kind of the right kind of thinner for the thing that you want to do. That's been quite an adventure for me, and it's been a pleasant one, and I'm gonna miss using oil until I can figure out how to use them at home. Part of me doesn't want to risk it because I don't want the cats to get covered in oil paint, and obviously like the use of terps, it's not exactly animal friendly, so I'm gonna have to try and figure out something there. But yeah, oil is my next one.
It's changed how I've done painting with acrylic. I now do wet on wet painting with acrylic because of how my experience with oil changed my perception of paint application. Because acrylic dries and then you're painting on top of that layer, it's so different than oil where it doesn't dry. So then next time you do another session, you're mixing into that layer. It doesn't go on top of it, it goes with it. It mixes with it, and you can't really layer it on top unless it's been 2 or 3 weeks. Ordinarily it takes 2 or 3 weeks to dry. And so yeah, it's something which I really liked. But I like the fact that acrylic does dry and that it doesn't smell, and it's hard enough already for me to go, blue, yellow, red, white. I keep it that simple with acrylic because I can't start to incorporate loads of colours. I think I really can't process an extended palette, you know, so that I've always got to have the very basics, the most basic set of colours, because I just can't operate outside of that at the moment. It's just a bit too overwhelming. I don't know why, but oil paint was such an enjoyable experience for me that I was super excited for you. And that, I believe, is a Van Gogh set of oil paints as well.
It is.
She's, I don't know what makes it Van Gogh, but I thought because it is Jamie's favourite artist, I thought it'd be a nice little set for you to have. And
I think with this set, I am maybe going to try and do some smaller ones at home. Maybe if I go into the bedroom, because the ones that I've got in uni are like the massive Galleria tubes. So I think it would be good to do some small oil paintings at home. Maybe use like linseed instead of terps. Because it is something that I want to continue doing. I did notice though when I went back to acrylic that I felt rushed.
Really?
Like the entire process I felt rushed because I knew it was going to dry really quickly. So that was interesting because I'd never experienced that before. But I do really like oil. Yeah.
It's just a lovely sensation, I think, to push around a more creamy.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the oil that you use. I used cheap oil at first. It was really not pleasant to mix and push around. And what actually happened was when I'd push the paintbrush on the canvas, the paint would separate and my brush would go through it as if it was, you know, as if I had white spirit on the paintbrush, which I didn't. It was just such cheap oil paint that when I tried to brush it, the paint would just create this line as though I was, you know, doing road markings. It was weird. And then someone in the class that I was in gave me their Jackson's white oil paint, and it was just because she couldn't open it, and she said, if you can open it, you can have the rest of it. I just want to use a blob. And I opened it because I thought I absolutely want this paint. And since then it was using that with cheap oils. So I just had one white, which was expensive, with a load of cheap oils, and it made the world of difference. It was the most pleasurable, you know, sensation, like tactile experience between the brush and the canvas that I've ever had. And I don't do it often enough, but I think it is because of the setting. Much like Jamie said, you have to have a window open for the terps to air out, and you have to have all these different things like white spirit is a thinner, linseed oil is a flow enhancer, and then you've got other things that you can use. There are different oil kind of little pots of, you know, liquids to use with it, and I'm not experienced enough to know it, but I've seen it enough where I've even seen people who obviously paint with acrylic, and then they will touch up the acrylic painting with oil afterwards because it heightens certain aspects, and it'll just create focal points on the on the canvas. And I've not tried that myself because I'm not an experienced painter, but I do love it. There is a great love for that, and as I said, it's completely changed how I do acrylic painting because I have to do wet on wet now. It's just ruined mixing paint and keeping paint and then having that mix to apply. It just feels very clinical doing, this is my purple, this is my blue, this is my red, and there we go, those are the paints there. I used to love that, but now oils have sort of ruined that for me. So yeah, it's kind of, it's a kind of double-edged sword really. Anyway, I agree, it's amazing, oil paint. But I'm going to go on to my second to last favourite thing, and that is these. Now this is a mixture of charcoal and graphite blocks. That's why they're split in half. I have half of one, half of the other. A friend of mine, I bought her both because she's a fantastic drawer and painter, and she snapped them all in half and gave me one case so that we could both have both, and which is a lovely thing to do. This is the tin for the XL charcoal, and it's the same thing for the graphite. They're Derwent sets of chunky XL blocks, and they're really nice. But I tell you what is really enjoyable with them is to draw and then to smudge it with your finger, because it just goes into this kind of, it's like a dry paste, if you know what I mean. It kind of spreads where there's no mottled effect in there, there's no texture in it. It just goes to this smooth, either brown or grey or whatever you're drawing with. It's something which is really strange as a media, but I think that it's really interesting as far as, like the yellows are really quite a deep yellow. It's not a bright, garish yellow. It's a really, strange kind of almost a browny yellow. And the blue, again, it's not a super bright pop blue. It's kind of it's a mid blue, but it's I don't know how to explain them, but they're very interesting tones to them, and it's very enjoyable to use. Messy again, but I do quite like dry media, and this is one where I've sometimes got really good results, and other times I really struggle with, because you can't do fiddly specific things because there's no nib to it. There's no sharpening any of these. I mean, every angle of it is blunt. Even if you try to use the corner, you're kind of stabbing in the dark.
Yeah.
So it's a very vague way to draw. But at the same time, I highly recommend them for anyone who is drawing, because it's great fun, especially on big surfaces. So try that out. It's good stuff.
My last one, I decided to pull out the full set that I have for some reason. I could have just showed one. Are Posca pens.
Oh, nice.
They are the 0.7 millimeters, and I think they're all 0.7. I haven't played around with them as much as I would like to, and I think again it's a comfort thing. Like, I'm not fully comfortable using them, and I don't really know what I would use them for, but I have done like small test swatches and stuff to see like the kind of pigment that they give off, and I do really like them. They are quite like, the paint flows really well. I've had some other, I don't know what the brand was, some other paint pens before, and I noticed that they dried up really quick, so I'm not sure if these are going to be the same. It's probably going to have to be like I don't know, in a year's time, where I'm like, let's do a review. But I want to find something that I can use these for, even if it's, because I was thinking if I if I do another acrylic painting, I could even use like the white to highlight certain bits, because it is a paint pen.
Yeah.
So I could use them for touching up and stuff like that. But obviously with uni, I haven't really had time to paint like outside of uni work, so I think that's something I'm gonna have to explore later on in life.
They are acrylic. It's acrylic paint in there, because I've used them a lot. The Posca paint pens I've used probably more than other paint materials. They're great for outlines. If you ever want to do graphic stuff and you want to do like a force field outline, they're great for that. And they're great for having I mean, you can shake them and then you can push the nib in, because the nibs aren't solid, they push in. And if you do that, sometimes they puddle. And you can sometimes mix certain colours by puddling them on the surface, and then either using a brush. If you ever use a brush with puddled Posca paint, it's so thin. It's really quite fun, because it still stays solid, but it's thinner than any paint you've ever applied, because usually you've just not got enough water in your acrylic to make it like that thin without it showing kind of a split or a break in the paint pigment. Whereas Posca paint is some sort of mixture where it mustn't be water, it must be something else where they've thinned it, because you can have a paintbrush brushing it on, and it's almost like gouache, where gouache is like, it goes very thin, but you can't see through it. It's just a matte finish, and I quite like that with Posca pens. I really enjoy it. They're really quite nice. Yeah. That's great.
We shall see in the future.
Yeah, but the problem with them is that they are otherwise not mixable. They are the colour that they come in, which is less personable. Anyway, this is supposed to be positive stuff. So the last positive review that I'm going to give of some, not review, but a positive feedback for things that I love using as far as materials, is a chamois. Now, I heard about a chamois on a random video that I think was posted by Stan Prokopenko, but I'm sure it was Glenn Vilppu who was the artist, because it was an older drawer, and I'm sure that he said to use a chamois, and I was like, never heard the word chamois, don't know what that means, and they've not mentioned it in uni, and it's something where if you like to draw, and I love to draw, this is a really interesting way to start. And It's kind of, I think it's an animator's tool. I could be completely wrong there. Definitely good for life drawing. I absolutely recommend it. And it's just, all I've got is a serviette, and I've put it into a tin with my charcoal sticks and let it get dirty. And that's all a chamois is something that's picked up pigment. When you've drawn on paper, try to use this serviette to rub some of it off. And you may destroy the drawing, but you create a chamois. And this just means that when you've got a piece of paper, you can start off a drawing with the chamois first, and you'll have certain marks go on the paper before you start doing darker marks. And then you'll have a form where you're like, okay, this is darker here, and you can go darker with it, and it will create a smudgy texture on there. And it may seem like a silly, why would I use that? But you've already got something on there that's kind of cloudy and wispy and dreamlike, which you won't have with a pencil. So if you're using a pencil and a chamois, your drawing will have this nice quality to it that it just won't have without a chamois. So I do recommend that. Something that's very cheap you can make yourself. And all it takes is just keeping it in a tin or in some sort of pencil case with mainly charcoal, because you want it to go black. Now I've got in my tin, which is wrong and I need to remove it, I've got a bright pop pink pastel. So that's affecting the chamois, and I need to put that somewhere else because I'm trying to keep it black and grey, basically. But yeah, that is the last of my enjoyable media materials and things that I like to use.
Wow, that was a lot.
Yeah. It's technically I've got one more.
I hope you enjoyed listening to us ramble.
Yeah, I had to chop one off because I thought I can't keep adding things, and I have got, in fact, I've got two additional things, but they're not as important enough. They're very similar to the other things, and one of them I've barely used in my life, so it's not really suitable. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, but it could go on forever. So yeah,
definitely.
Hope you enjoyed it. That has really run us long enough for one episode, so we're going to leave it there for that one, and in the next episode we will be doing materials and media that we don't really enjoy so much and we've had a bad experience with. But for now, this has been an episode of Studio Buddy, doing a podcast with a little gay guitar. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.